I am Brian Davis with AccuPlan Benefit Services, and today I'm very excited to have Mark Weinstein, the president and founder of MJW Investments, with us today to talk about student housing and the opportunities out there today. Mark, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you for the opportunity of speaking to everybody.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have you. I see people are logging into the call right now. Just a little administration stuff for everybody. There's a chat box in the bottom right-hand corner if you want to write in questions. We should have some time for Q&A at the end. Also, there's an option to raise your hand and write in a question in the question section. Either way will work. I'll try to get to those best I can at the end of the call. Again, we are recording this today, this September 11th, 2014. You know, everybody probably remembers where we were 13 years ago today. I just wanted to make a mention of that before we get going. But today, let's talk about some other positive things, about some opportunities of what people can do with their retirement accounts and some specific investments, specifically student housing. Mark will come on in about 15 minutes or so to talk about those opportunities, and I'll kind of jump into self-directed IRA. A little disclaimer before I move forward. AccuPlan, we're not broker-dealers or investment advisors, so please consult with your financial professionals before entering into any type of financial investment. The material for today is for educational purposes only. So let me give you guys a little bit of background about myself. My name is Brian Davis, Director of Business Development for AccuPlan in San Diego. My parents are rice farmers up in Northern California. I decided to head south and went to college at UC Santa Barbara, graduated there in 2001. I moved down to San Diego shortly thereafter and got into doing loans. I was doing mostly subprime loans in a builder division here. And in 2007, subprime loans went away, builder loans went away, at least here locally in San Diego. And so I toiled around in life insurance and health insurance and annuities for a year or two before getting involved with self-directed IRAs and learning how people can invest in different alternative investments in their IRA. And I've opened up over 1,000 of these accounts. I've been with AccuPlan the last 2+ years. And AccuPlan, as you can see here, we're a leader in self-directed IRA administration and solo 401ks. We have our own trust company called American Estate and Trust, which allows us to be an IRA custodian. And we've had that trust company since 2007. So let's go to the first screen here. So for those of you unfamiliar with the self-directed IRA, you're not alone. 1974, Congress passes the ERISA Act. This ERISA Act outlines the retirement plan system that we see today with IRAs and 401ks. In the IRA world, it said you need to have a custodian to direct your investments. Well, that field's been dominated by the investment banks and insurance companies, which offer securities, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and annuities. So that's why a lot of people don't know about this space, or if they do, they only know a little about it. So financial planners, they're going to talk to you about securities, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, those types of things. Attorneys and CPAs, depending on their level of specialty, they might know a little bit about it. So hopefully today I can show you a lot, or at least heighten your understanding of self-directed IRAs. So in 2010, there was about $4.7 trillion in IRAs. The last number I heard that this number was just over $6 trillion now. And that's just in IRAs alone. It's not in counting qualified retirement plans like 401ks. Well, there's another about $12 trillion. Those are trillions with a T. Only about 2% of those investments in 2010 were in alternative investments. So things that a self-directed IRA can invest in. And that number is closer to 4 now. And a lot of the reason for that is with the economic downturn in 2008 and 2009, people were looking to get out of the stock market, see what their options were. And with the rise of the information age online, people were able to find out about self-directed IRAs and that they can invest in alternatives with them. 2012, when Mitt Romney was running for president, it came out that he had a self-directed IRA worth in excess of $100 million. And from my understanding, that's a Roth IRA. So that brought a lot of attention to our field, so it's been growing like a weed. So what do we see? At AccuPlan, these are the main asset classes we are seeing. We're seeing real estate, we're seeing notes, we're seeing private funds. And those private funds are invested in a variety of things, from real estate to oil and gas to you name it. And also, a lot of people use a self-directed IRA that like to invest in precious metals like gold and silver. I don't particularly see that client. I mostly see the real estate clients and the private businesses and notes, but that is something that we do as well. As you can see, you can invest in just about anything with an IRA. You can invest in rental properties, tax liens, foreign property, lease options. The list can go on and on and on. The IRS, when they passed ERISA, they never made a list of acceptable investments. They only made a list of what you cannot invest in. And they really only included two things, and that is life insurance contracts and collectibles. And this list here is a list of what the IRS deems as a collectible, like art collection, rug collection, alcoholic beverage, anything illegal. And later on, they even made some exceptions to the metals or gems here to allow certain precious metals be allowed in an IRA, and even some specific coins. So those are the two things that the IRS said you can't invest in. For those of you that have studied on self-directed IRAs before, you probably also heard that S-Corps, IRAs aren't allowed to invest in S-Corps. And that's true, as S-Corps only allow naturalized persons to be members. They won't allow IRA to be members. However, I've seen plenty of people loan money to S-Corps from their IRA. But those are the things you can't invest in. But that's not it. There's also these things called prohibited transactions. And I just kind of want to highlight this part a little bit, because this is where people can trip themselves up with a self-directed IRA. So a prohibited transaction, and I'm sorry to use my industry jargon here, this is when an IRA has a transaction with what they call a disqualified person, and they consider that a prohibited transaction. So who's a disqualified person? Who can't your IRA do business with? And this can all be found in Internal Revenue Code 4975 if anybody wants to look this up online. It's not the easiest of reading, but it's something that will help guide you with this. But essentially, there's no self-dealing in an IRA. You kind of need to keep the transaction at arm's length. And there's some real specific rules here about who your IRA can do business with. For instance, you can't do business with yourself. So you can't invest in, you can't loan yourself money. You can't invest in your own company. So besides yourself, your spouse, and you want to think about this in a straight line up and down. Besides your spouse, your parents, your grandparents, your kids' spouses, your grandkids, and any company in which they are essentially the majority owner in. So those are the transactions that your IRA can't get involved in, or else it's considered prohibited. And if the IRS were to find out about one of these transactions that got involved in your IRA, they would disqualify that whole IRA that transaction was in. So you want to make sure you know the rules, and sometimes you might even think about setting up separate IRAs for different types of transactions if you think one might be in a gray area. I'll try to highlight this a little bit here. I'm assuming everybody remembers the game show Deal or No Deal that was on NBC a few years back now. But let's do this in relation to the prohibited transaction rules. So, could your IRA lend you $10,000? Deal or no deal? That one's no deal. That's self-dealing. 401k money? You could loan yourself money from a 401k plan, but that's a different animal than an IRA, and we'll talk a little bit about 401ks in a minute. But an IRA, you cannot loan yourself money. What about your brother? Could your IRA lend your brother $10,000? Deal or no deal? That one is a deal. Your brother is not in lineal ascension or descension to you. He's kind of on that side-to-side plane. So brothers, aunts, and uncles, they're okay. However, you still have to be careful with loaning money to your brother. If you loan your money to your brother, and then the brother goes around and just invests in your personal company, the IRS is going to say, oh, via the indirect rule, you're just trying to skirt around the rules to create a prohibited transaction by setting it up that way. So just because you're loaning it to your brother doesn't necessarily make it safe if the intent is a prohibited transaction in the end. So I just wanted to point that out. How about your stepson? Could your IRA lend your stepson $10,000, deal or no deal? This one's deal. If it was your son, it would be no deal. For some reason, stepson's okay. Again, you do want to watch with that indirect rule, so you still need to be a little bit careful. Now, what about your daughter-in-law? Can your IRA lend your daughter-in-law $10,000? The answer to that one is no deal. Your children and their spouses. So you see, it can be a little bit tricky with these rules, and that's what I'm here for. So if somebody's getting involved with what they think might be a good transaction, it might not, come to me. I can help at least point you in the right direction of figuring it out. People come with me with all kinds of complex scenarios, and I do my best to answer them. Sometimes, you might need to speak to an attorney, but I can at least point everybody in the right direction. So how do I put money in a self-directed IRA? I get this question all the time. Self-directed is really just a marketing term, and it means that we allow people to invest their IRA dollars in anything allowable under IRS guidelines. But really, we're like any other IRA custodian, just like the main brokerage houses. We have traditional IRAs, Roth IRAs, SEP IRAs, simple IRAs, and even the solo 401k. So, for instance, if you have a Roth IRA with a brokerage house, we could do what's called a trustee-to-trustee transfer. So we just move the cash from that Roth IRA over to a self-directed Roth IRA with us, therefore giving you more control to invest in what you know best, whether that be real estate or private funds. If your funds are an employer plan, like a 401k or 403b, an old one, you're going to want to request what's called a direct rollover. So you open the account with us, contact the administrator of your old plan, request a direct rollover. You don't want to take a distribution of those funds because the government will take out 20%. I've only seen one client do that on accident. Generally, the 401k companies know to do a direct rollover. A question I get asked here a lot, Brian, what about my current retirement plan? Can I move those funds over to an IRA? The answer to that is maybe. It really depends on the type of qualified retirement plan it is and your age, and whether that plan allows for what's called an in-service rollover. So if you are in a qualified retirement plan and you want to move some to any type of IRA, whether it's self-directed or not, contact your administrator, ask if they allow an in-service rollover, and see if you can move those funds to an IRA. The third and final way to move money over to a retirement plan is to make an annual contribution. Now, most folks that are W-2 employees are kind of limited to the traditional and Roth IRAs, which you're not allowed to contribute all that much per year, only $5,500 a year. If you're over 50, you can throw in an extra $1,000. A traditional IRA is a pre-tax IRA. A Roth is an after-tax IRA. If anybody has questions about that, please feel free to contact me offline. I can go into the specifics of that. Then there's plans for the self-employed. So a SEP IRA is a self-employed pension plan. And this is for the self-employed individual and perhaps their employees. This allows them to contribute up to 25% of their adjusted gross income with a cap of $52,000. This is a pre-tax retirement plan, just like a traditional IRA. These funds go in, and it's a tax write-off when making that contribution to the plan. So this is, I see a lot of self-employed individuals have this type of IRA. Simple IRAs are for small businesses that want to offer their employees a retirement plan but don't want to pay the fees associated with a 401k plan. It has much smaller contribution limits to a 401k. I think it allows a client to contribute up to $11,500 a year. If they're over 50, they can contribute $14,000 out of their pay, and the company does a small little match. I rarely see that plan, but it is out there, and it is available to be self-directed. It's also a pre-tax plan, just like the SEP and traditional. Then there's the individual K. You might hear this called a solo 401k. This is a very exciting plan, in my opinion. This is a plan that allows this specifically for a self-employed person, whether they've incorporated, have an LLC, or just a sole proprietor, that has no full-time W-2 employees. This allows them to have their own 401k plan. They can make contributions as both employee and as a company match. So it's a lot easier to get to that $52,000 limit as compared to a SEP IRA. I'll give you an example here of the 1K. So the 1K, create the 401K plan for you. You are the trustee of the plan. That means you have the signature authorizations. You are essentially the custodian of the plan, which is different than an IRA. And you're the administrator. You're the one who keeps the records of it. You can create this plan and invest directly into assets. You don't have to go through the custodian to do so. Or you can create a holding company. Some companies do that. So how this can work, you can roll over any other of those pre-tax retirement plans to a 401K and vice versa. So if you want, you can roll over those funds into one of these. You create the 401K, you can make your annual contribution. As an employee of the plan, you can defer out of your salary up to $17,500 a year. If you're over 50, you can throw in an extra $5,500 a year, making that $23,000. Then you can make what's called the profit sharing match. The profit sharing match can be up to 25% of what your W-2 income was if you're incorporated in W-2 yourself, or of your adjusted gross income if you're not W-2ing yourself. The combination of the two is $52,000 if you're over 55, or if you're over 50, it's $57,500. Again, it's a great plan. It allows you to buy real estate directly. You can make Roth deferrals into it, and you can loan yourself money from the plan up to $50,000 or 50% of the plan assets, whichever is less. So that's different than the IRA. So it's a great product, but not everybody fits that box. Most people fit the IRA box. Now, a lot of people want to do this, have the control of their IRA funds like they could a 401K. So that's what a checkbook IRA is. And a checkbook IRA is when you create an entity that your IRA owns. There's two methods here. One's an LLC method, and one is a business trust. The LLC, the IRA becomes a member of the LLC. You become an unpaid manager of that LLC, which gets you around those prohibited transaction rules as long as you're unpaid. The issue that we find here, especially in California, is you still are going to have to pay the California franchise tax fees of $800 a year plus a gross receipts tax if you fall into those gross receipts. A business trust works very similarly. It's taxed as a partnership on a federal level. So if it's a single member entity, it's a pass-through entity, you don't even have to file a return, similar to the LLC. And since it's a trust, you don't have to pay the franchise tax board any fee. So it's a great tool if you want to use that. For more info on that, check out retirementcheckbook.com. Again, retirementcheckbook.com. But most people, they fall into that IRA category. We make it real simple. They can open an account online, get an account number within a few minutes, and then we work on funding the account via those transfer, rollover, or contribution methods. This is the part that takes the longest. This can take anywhere from a few days to a few weeks, depending on who your IRA custodian is and how quickly they move. So if you're looking to get an investment in alternatives, you'll want to get that going right away. And then you'll provide us a buy direction letter directing us to buy an asset. We're generally a couple days on fulfilling that investment. So again, IRAs are not limited to those stocks, bonds, mutual funds. You definitely can invest in alternatives like real estate. I have my contact information here. Feel free to email me at briandavis@accuplan.net or check out my website, accuplansandiego.com, or even retirementcheckbook.com. From there, I'm going to turn it over to Mark. Mark, are you here?
I'm here. Hi. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad to have this opportunity today to talk to you about student housing and investing in student housing. All right.
Well, I'm working on getting the screen over. Well, I'm very happy to have you, Mark, and I'm excited to hear more about the opportunities that are in student housing and hear more about MJW. So, Mark, I'll let you take it away there if you're ready to go.
Yep, I'm going to do an overview of MJW, and then as you see in the table of contents, what is student housing, why invest in student housing, and why invest with MJW. MJW has been in business for about 30 years. I was a lawyer originally, and when I was in law school, I went around school and asked people to give me their student loan money since we had no money, and we bought our first building. And from there, we've been very active. In the last 12 months, we bought at least $70 million of properties, most of it student housing, some of it traditional value-add apartments. I'm the majority owner of a $400 million portfolio, which has a heavy emphasis on multifamily and student housing. I have a history of transactions. We've done about in excess of $800 million. We presently own and manage student housing projects in California, Utah, Washington, and Oregon, and we have some more coming. I was awarded in 2014 in the Real Estate 4 magazine being a California real estate icon, and the Business Journal over the last several years has always rated us in the top 20 by square footage commercial developers in Los Angeles. What is student housing? It's privately owned off-campus multifamily properties where the units are predominantly leased to undergraduate students. So a lot of people wonder, is it something different? The apartments sometimes are exactly like regular apartments, 1-, 2-bedroom apartments, but a lot of times in a lot of universities there's called purpose-built student housing where they're building things that are 4 bedrooms with several baths and different combinations, take advantage of one of the unique things of student housing, which is renting by the bed. Now, the difference between student housing and traditional apartments is that, for the most part, student housing is by the bed. So each bed that you have in the unit has a lease. And in apartments, you lease the entire unit. So there's a lot more leases in student housing. Also in student housing, for the most part, the rent that they pay is all-inclusive. Sometimes they're paying certain utilities and certain things, but for the most part, you roll it all up into one rent. But where traditional apartments, residents pay most, if not all, the utilities. Student housing has a very quick turnover. You have about a month to get all your stuff ready in the units, and you do your outside stuff all year long. And it's much different than regular housing in that with student housing, everything's vacant at once, where in traditional apartments, you have leasing and turnover year-round. So all year you're renting and you're having vacant units. But in student housing, it's a one-shot deal. And that's a really important thing, is that this is an operating business. This isn't management of apartments. And what differentiates people is that if they understand this is an operating business and they're good at that and they're good at management, they succeed. If they think it's like apartments, they'll fail because it's a lot different. And it's more like a hotel than it is an apartment. Student housing has a historically stable and captive demand. People need to go to school, and often our best amenities is that we're right near school. So there's a long history of there being demand and usage of student housing near campus. Student housing also is recession resilient. Even in bad times, probably more so when there are not jobs. People are going to college and they need somewhere to live. Traditional apartments are much more vulnerable to recession. There's a lot more sway with rents and other things, and people double up more, and there's a lot of credit problems because people don't have jobs. Whereas in student housing, the parents are usually helping. Also, student housing, it's management intensive. As I mentioned, it's like an operating business. Making sure that you are pre-leasing when pre-leasing season starts and getting leased up before school starts is paramount to your success for the entire year. Whereas in regular management of apartments, you have plenty of time all year to get things leased and filled up. But in student housing, where a lot of regular apartment owners have failed, is when they try to treat it like an apartment and they do a rehab, renovation of units, and they miss the turn, and they miss the year, or really have a very bad occupancy based on not being able to deliver the product. The student housing market overall, the yields are somewhat better in that you can buy a student housing deal for about, we call it 50 bips. It has to do with the capitalization rate, the value of properties. So you get a little better deal compared to conventional multifamily housing. The largest universities, on campus being when the housing is on the campus as opposed to off campus, which we do, which is apartments outside of the jurisdiction of the university. Large universities only house 22% of their undergraduate student body in on-campus housing. So the rest needs to be taken care of by private owners like myself and MJW. There's an increased demand for student housing based on the rise in college enrollment and the shortage of student housing supply. Now, this isn't true at all schools. There's a lot of extra building at some schools, and you have to really make sure that you have a product type that's going to be successful even when new things come on. And one of the things that we look to, being walking distance and right next to campus, is that's an amenity you can't emulate. It's either there, either have it or you don't have it. When the new stuff comes on, they're much more expensive cost, and the rent is much higher than what we offer. So we're always a viable alternative to these more hotel luxury properties than to what we have. There's a projected 13.6 increase in student enrollment between 2010 and 2021. So why invest in student housing? Why did I get into student housing? Well, basically, I thought it was a way to create value that, because it was an operating business, we could differentiate ourselves. It's recession resilient. There's very attractive risk-adjusted returns based on what the risk you're taking and the returns you get. And we're also now taking advantage of historically low interest rates. We usually pay a higher capitalization rate, which is how value of property is determined, and we get better yields than conventional apartments. So why would you want to invest with MJW? We have a long history of success in all the different disciplines we've been in, but mostly multifamily and student housing. Over a long career, I think that we've achieved a 44% IRR on investment compared to most people being 15 to 18%. So we have a long history of success in multifamily and student housing. We have a great track record for dramatically increasing the cash flow on the property. We have years of experience in efficient hands-on student property operations and also in apartment operations. Very important how management is done. We're very attuned to being hands-on on what goes on and how it's executed. We have the ability to get real estate deals that are off the regular market, off-market. Based on relationships that we have, we're able to capitalize on situations where value is lower, there's mismanagement or undermanagement, and we're successful in being able to turn the properties around and increasing the income by a lot. We're expert in marketing and rebranding. I can't emphasize enough that this is an operating business, it's a customer service business. And we look to understand the students' needs, not what we think is important, not what we think we should market, not what we think we should brand. We rely on these students to help guide what we do, how we do our social media, and how we market our properties. Our investment strategy. We target schools with great sports programs, high enrollment, and good name recognition. Because people are always going to these schools. We find that schools like Oregon and BYU and places that we're at that have great football teams, and now Michigan State, a little hint that's coming up soon, also have a great football team. In fact, Oregon and Michigan State just played, and Oregon was dominant, and it creates a lot of excitement in these schools that they have great football teams, and it's worked well for us when they have vibrant sports teams. There are people always wanting to go to those schools. The proximity to campus is our #1 amenity. I mentioned it earlier. That is something that someone can't just copy. You're either there, you're not there. And so that is a real protection against overbuilding, because you have a B or C quality property that you've made really nice. You're not having to ask the type of rents the newer projects are, and you're right next to school. We focus on the middle market and value. We're at universities that are very well known, but they're not necessarily the biggest universities, other than Michigan State, which has actually 52,000 enrollment. For the most part, we're doing middle market, and we're looking for value add. We understand the local market and what students need. It's incredible at any type of real estate to understand where you're going to be and what the market is and what the enrollment is. Job growth and other economics are important, but remember, it's a college town. So primarily we're focusing on the success of the university and to a second degree the success of everybody outside the university, but we're not looking for what's going on in cities that are 100 miles away. It's what's going on here in this market. We focus on finding projects that are undermanaged or mismanaged. Often we're buying from owners that aren't as sophisticated. The institutional investors aren't going after these deals, and they're not being marketed. So we're taking advantage of, maybe someone wasn't a bad manager, they just undermanaged it, and we take advantage of our expertise and skill, and we create value both in the operation side, both on the marketing side, and also on physical improvements. I want to give you a case study of something that we've done recently. Liberty Square.
Mark, you there?
I'm here.
All right, there you go. You went out for a second there.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, so anyways, I'm doing a case study on Liberty Square Apartments. It's at BYU. We acquired it in November 2013. Provo, Utah is outside of Salt Lake City, and this was a value-add investment. So we looked at this investment. It was 816 beds. It was student housing, and it was off-market, but with a very short time to do your due diligence. The owner of this property was a man that lived in Oregon who never owned student housing and whose management company was out of state and never managed student housing. So this provided a lot of opportunity to better manage a property, to create better marketing, social media, and programs for the students and meeting the students' needs. This property was the best word in real estate, location, location, location. It was very close to the center of campus. It was the second largest project at BYU, and it definitely was old and tired and needed to be spruced up and rebranded with new energy. It's the second largest student housing project, as I mentioned, at BYU, and I'd mentioned there was an out-of-state owner. It required restructuring of the existing management. And what we do always, we rely on what the students want, what they think is important, rather than what us guys or women think is important. We did a tenant survey, and it taught us to focus on common area amenities and resident activities at this school. This school has a lot of restrictions on drinking, alcohol, and other things, and so social activities are very important. People are looking to meet their spouses at this particular university, and our project is known for being the best place to meet your spouse. It's on the social media, it's everywhere, and our residents are our best advertising. They sell our property because they're very happy. Some of the stuff that we did is we put a new state-of-the-art fitness center in, and a new outdoor sports court. Both things were upgraded or brand new, and the students really wanted this, and they were very happy when we did it. The other really important thing is social programming. In the summer, we did a summer splash. In the winter, we did a polar plunge. And there were awards for these things, and the students really get into it, and they send us on Facebook and the internet, and there couldn't be anything better than people looking at our activities. People that don't live on our property want to be there, and they want to be there, and we're oversold, we have a waiting list, and so they'll come next year seeing all the great things that we do there, and we make it a fun place for everybody. In the spring, we did an Easter egg hunt, and just people really love little activities, Taco Tuesday, whatever it is, pizza, you know, make it interesting, always have something different, and keep them happy, and ask them, what do they want? What's important to them? So the results. We've only owned this since November, but the first year we exceeded our budget. We're going to have a 12% cash-on-cash return. We increased the net operating income, that's the bottom line, by $300,000 in the first 6 months. We locked in long-term, low-interest rate financing. We found other income sources to charge for that weren't previously charged, and we have a wait list to lease. You know, a very successful project. So I thought that I would look for question and answers, but I might also want to mention that we're presently in contract at a project at Michigan State University, which also is a great university, and it's our latest project. It was off-market, and it was a great opportunity for us. So with that, if there's questions or comments, I'm here to answer those.
Started talking and I had my phone muted still. Thanks very much, Mark. That was a lot of really good information, and we have a lot of time here for some questions if you guys have some. I see I have a few in the queue. There seem to be a few here for Mark. Mark, don't students damage the units? Does that make it a more risky investment?
They do damage the units. There's a couple things you could do about that. One is you can require them to get renter's insurance. The second thing is that this is part of what we've projected in the operating budget, that there will be a certain amount of damage. Their security deposit will pay for most of it, but it's part of the operations, and we've been able to keep that to a minimum, and it's not been an issue for us.
Okay. Here's a question for me. Brian, how much does it cost to have an account? I'm assuming that's an IRA. An IRA, we charge a one-time setup fee of $50 and then a flat annual fee of $275 a year. There's some small fees for wires. If there's a lot of dividend payments, we'll start charging a little, but the basics are $275 a year. All right, we got another one here. Mark, what are your typical types of returns? This person wants to know.
Okay, so as far as the returns, like for example, most of the deals that we've done recently, we've had the investors have gotten an average of 10-12% over a 7-year period, plus the profits obviously at the end. If we were to sell the property at the particular point, they'd make double their money on the investment. So it's worked out really well. And there's also tax advantages when you're owning the real estate. The depreciation from the property shelters a lot of the income that you receive in these deals. And there's one other interesting thing is sometimes we've done 1031 tax-free exchanges. So we've taken the profits without paying taxes and bought a new property and did the same thing all over again. So it's been successful for us in 2 different ways.
All right. And this is more towards you, I believe. Are you worried about leasing up?
Well, you know, it's always a concern. It's part of the thing about it being an operating business. After you've leased up in a year, you're already starting working on the next year to pre-lease it, and you can never start early enough. And so we have programs specifically focused on these lease-ups, marketing, branding, etc., so that we're leased up before the school year starts.
All right. And again, if anybody else has any last-minute questions here, I only see one more in the queue. Feel free to do it in the questions section or in the chat box session. Last one I see here for you. Do you have any current deals available for our investors?
Well, the Michigan State deal, interesting enough, we did that recently, and in one day we oversubscribed on the property. It means we had more people than we could take, and some of the people were friends of mine. I had to, tell them I didn't have room in this deal. So they go quickly usually because of the fact that we don't often buy that many properties. We're focused. We have a great track record, and so they sign up pretty quickly.
We got one last-minute question in since I put it out there. Says, not sure if you can answer this, but is there a UBTI issue on debt finance real estate by an IRA on retirement plans? And the answer to that is yes. To an IRA, there could be a tax issue of unrelated debt financed income. Mark, I'll ask you, how leveraged up are these funds that you have?
Well, actually, we might go in at 70 or 75%, but generally we've created so much value in the end that it's usually 50% loan to value.
Okay, so there is a loan there. So there would be, to answer your question, yeah, there would be some calculations to figure out of unrelated business income tax, specifically unrelated debt financed income, depending on the net and the net income there. So I don't know if, Mark, if that's something you guys have discussed much.
Actually, what happens, we have a lot of people that have invested our SEP IRAs with us, and they're SEP IRA person, someone like you, and their accountant speak, and they structure it in a way that it's always been beneficial to people to do it, and they've figured out the economics of what needs to be done, and they handle it. We provide them information on the debt, on the value, and things like that, but they actually do the work, the accountant, and possibly coordinating with someone like you who is a custodian.
Yeah, so those people that might not know what we're talking about, if there's debt financing involved and you use an IRA, the IRA is subject to a tax based off the percentage of debt financing off the net income, not the gross income. And to do so, they would file a form called a 990T form. They'd actually fill it out, submit it to us, and we'd file it on the IRA's behalf and pay any taxes there. But just so most of you know, I mean, leverage still works, even with an IRA and even with UDFI. But yeah, it's something to definitely consider. Now, if you're using a solo 401k, the 401k plan is exempt from the UDFI portion of UBIT, which is what we're talking about here, the debt financed income. So if somebody falls in the category of being able to use a solo 401k, they don't have to worry about that leverage piece. All right. Do we have any last-minute questions here? Got some time left, guys. But Mark, if I don't get any questions, I want to thank you very much for the education on student housing. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. I know this is a niche in real estate that not everybody talks about, and I was very happy to bring it to my folks and show them what opportunities are out there. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity, and if anybody else wants to follow up in the future on an investment, let us know, and have a great day, everybody.
All right. Thank you, guys, and have a great day, and we'll talk soon.